Chapter 1815 Trojan Horse Invasion. As long as Zhang Yi's doors were made impossible to open, then Zhang Yi's combat power would drop by more than 70%. Demon God Ding stayed in the middle of dimensional space for more than 2 minutes. Zhang Yi just kept quietly observing him until Demon God Ding intended to make a move to detonate the dimensional space, then Zhang Yi would finally make a move. The piece of space he was in suddenly cracked open, and from above the sky, a huge metal box fell down, noiselessly crashing into the area that could probably be called the bottom of space. Demon God Ding's attention was immediately drawn to it, but none of this could stop his next move. He would not be led by the nose by Zhang Yi. As long as he detonated this piece of space, then the situation of the battle would be immediately reversed by him. Moreover, he wasn't worried about this metal box being Zhang Yi's means of attack. Zhang Yi's attack would not be able to cause fatal damage to him either. "I'm here now." Zhang Yi's voice suddenly rang in Demon God Ding's ears, and in an instant, Demon God Ding was immediately on full alert, waiting for the attack that might come at any moment. In the next moment, meteors rained down from the space he was in. It was an endless number of black energy bullets, which were mixed with special bullets that could destroy his defensive force field shield-piercing spear. On Demon God Ding's body, centipede armor hovered up, wrapping his body tightly. His hands were fast, and his spear hovered, isolating a piece of heaven and earth above his head, blocking all the attacks in the most overwhelming manner. And right at this moment, that metal box that Zhang Yi had thrown into the interdimensional space suddenly appeared with a demonic blue glow. Demon God Ding suddenly sensed that something was wrong as a signal was invading his body from the outside. Zhang Yi quietly waited for things to produce a change. It was because from now on, the battlefield was a place that was invisible to his naked eyes. In the middle of shadow space, Yang Xinxin maneuvered the huge supercomputer screen in front of her, on which various complicated codes flashed back and forth in multiple overlapping code boxes. 3 years after the end of the world, many people had already forgotten that Yang Xinxin's most praised ability was her skill as the world's top hacker. Later, the firewall of the entire shelter was built by her, and with her in charge, no one could invade the shelter through the network. In the midst of a war against the mutants, it was difficult to have space to utilize the hacker's skills. But what if the other party was a robot? Even if the source was still a life form, but the whole body was transformed into a machine, it would have to run with the help of a computer. Perhaps mechanical civilizations have other names for computers, but essentially they are all core devices that replace the human brain and carry out a large number of operations. No matter how hard the outside is, as long as the hacker invades the source, then it will inevitably collapse. This was also the reason why for such a long time, Yang Xinxin went against the norm and sat in front of the computer every day. The first step was to first decipher the mechanical language, or code, of the mechanical civilization. The second step was to figure out the operating mechanism of this machinery by studying the mega-mechanical life forms and demon god Gui. The third step was to make a Trojan horse and wait for the opportunity to start invading. The more complex and precise something was, the easier it was to reveal a breach. The mechanical civilization's demon gods were all super-age technological products, so invading it and interfering with it didn't even require a socket to plug in devices like USB drives. Just having a signal transmitter was enough. The next time was a battlefield between the duo of Yang Xinxin and Zhang Yi. Demon God Ding's core center was invaded by an external electronic signal and immediately issued an alarm. However, he had chosen to enter Zhang Yi's dimensional space by himself, and it was difficult for him to escape at this point. The key was that Zhang Yi was also in the orientation of the god's perspective, constantly attacking with various attacks. There was no way for Demon God Ding to deal with the battle in the outside world while allowing the central system to engage Yang Xinxin's Trojan horse. Inside Yang Xinxin's eyes, this world was no longer a complicated code, but a huge piece of space belonging to electronic signals. As she walked in it, the Trojan horse she had created became the most powerful weapon in her hands. The defense mechanism within Demon God Ding was very powerful and immediately began to counterattack her. The counterattacks came like a raging wind and rain, and the tight anti-invasion mechanism made the defense seem almost flawless. The civilization of the Super Era had done a perfect job in this area. However, it ultimately had cracks. In terms of arithmetic power, the supercomputer used by Yang Xinxin had its source taken from the demon god Gui taken from Liu Karen, and then improved by Liu Karen. Even though it was not as good as the new body's demon god Ding, the difference would at least not be too huge. Zhang Yi continued to put pressure on demon god Ding from the outside, and the defense mechanism's arithmetic power was insufficient, so soon the cracks became bigger and bigger. Yang Xinxin pressed on step by step, her hands and 10 fingers deftly danced on the keyboard. In the world of codes, she was like an empress, commanding the Trojan horse army and launching a fierce attack on demon god Ding's control center. Demon god Ding's eyes all changed, sometimes confused and sometimes clear. What had happened today had finally gone completely beyond his control. Creatures like humans had not only learned how to utilize their weapons, they had also learned their mechanical language, and had even come up with supercomputers whose arithmetic power was no weaker than theirs. Inside demon god Ding's mind, the system's alarm became more and more urgent, and he finally felt the crisis of death. Boom! He finally chose to ignite a red energy crystal, and that raging energy exploded directly inside Zhang Yi's dimensional space. But Zhang Yi had already prepared for it. So the moment the energy erupted, he chose to throw the demon god Gui directly out of the middle of dimensional space. Even though he had made sufficient preparations, this powerful energy impact still caused his dimensional gate to shatter a dozen times. Zhang Yi skillfully raised his dual guns. Party time. Although he didn't know what kind of effect demon god Ding's time supernatural ability had, it was enough to pull back far enough to assault him and ensure that he couldn't fully concentrate on fighting Liu Karen's invasion. Black energy bullets interspersed with shield-piercing spears rained down on demon god Ding like a torrential downpour. The strength of the two of them was originally in the middle, and originally, neither of them could do anything about the other, and they could only hope to make the other party reveal their cracks through a fierce battle. However, the addition of Yang Xinxin was a fatal blow to demon god Ding as an artificial human. It was like when two mutants of similar strength were fighting, suddenly a powerful illusionist appeared beside the other and would invade your brain. Although this kind of influence would not be so bad that demon god Ding would actually lose control of his body, it would more or less have an effect that would prevent him from focusing on his battle with Zhang Yi. There were times when it didn't need to be a huge weight to affect the balance of the scales, a single straw would suffice. Not to mention that Yang Xinxin was originally the human world's top genius within the field of computers. Breakthrough. Yang Xinxin opened her cherry lips, her voice was indifferent with a touch of indisputability, and she definitely pronounced the end. The world in Yang Xinxin's eyes was a huge palace made up of information flow. This was a domain that belonged to her, and programs that operated according to established rules were bound to have their loopholes. When the demon god Ding body was blasted with cracks by Zhang Yi, it was the time when she was able to implant the Trojan horse. This kind of invasion also achieved its best effect when Zhang Yi struck out at demon god Ding. Demon god Ding had to exert all his strength to fend off Zhang Yi's attack, but all of a sudden, he sensed that his right arm had suddenly lost control. Warning! The system has been subjected to an external intrusion and has lost control of the upper right limb. Demon god Ding was shocked in his heart, he knew that continuing the fight was now no longer in his favor. It was at this moment that a decision was made in his heart to escape this place at all costs. And that price was all the mechanical life forms in this place. Demon god Ding immediately gave orders to all the surrounding mechanical life forms to cover his escape. In the battlefield, the battle situation was very stalemate at this time, and the fight was very hard to be separated. However, after receiving the orders, the eyes of all the mechanical life forms emitted a red glow, looking incomparably bizarre. They no longer cared about the enemies beside them, but instead converged towards where demon god Ding was regardless of everything. Even if the mutants behind them were attacking them, they would rather be subjected to the risk of being destroyed and go forward to support demon god Ding. Zhang Yi sensed Demon God Ding's intention to escape, and his heart was somewhat touched. This was different from Demon God Gui, who would only carry out orders in a dull manner, unwilling to leave the battlefield until he was destroyed. But obviously, Demon God Ding was an existence of a higher level. In midair, at this time, 2 of the super-large mechanical life forms were destroyed by Liu Karen and Flower's joint efforts, and 3 more had suffered varying degrees of damage on them. But right now, they also abandoned their enemies and quickly flew towards Zhang Yi. A dazzling red light erupted from the top of the battleship, and a terrifying energy beam was unleashed towards Zhang Yi. An overloaded energy attack. Zhang Yi frowned and reached out to directly block their combined attack with everything under heaven. He was unable to dodge, or else he would leave Demon God Ding with an opportunity. Opportunities were always fleeting, and if he allowed Demon God Ding to escape, then with the technological level of the mechanical civilization, he would definitely be more prepared for the next battle. At that time, Zhang Yi would not have so many cards to deal with him. So this time, it had to be one. Boom! Zhang Yi took a hard hit from the 2 super aerial battleships, and the dimensional gate shook, but in the end, he was able to withstand it. Snow Owl and Flower killed from behind, Liu Karen maneuvered her main cannon and blasted at the battleships, and Flower's high-energy particle beam cannon hit the other battleship with precision. In order to cover Demon God Ding, they had focused all their energy into their main cannons to attack Zhang Yi, so at this moment, their backs were hit and the damage was very serious. This did buy Demon God Ding a slight chance. He forcefully unleashed his ability on his arm, and in the next instant, Yang Xinxin only felt that the code she had invaded into the mechanical arm was zeroed out. However, she didn't hesitate for a second, it was all expected. Having already had a successful experience, she quickly began to make a breakthrough to the rest of Demon God Ding's body. Divine Realm Netherworld Cleansing. Zhang Yi's attacks also fell like a raging storm. A move of Divine Realm Netherworld Cleansing could not be defended in advance. Zhang Yi had already finished releasing the skill before calling out his name, which carried a strong disorienting effect. Demon God Ding's body was viciously squeezed, and the metal of his thick centipede armor rubbed together, sparks splashing everywhere. Subsequently, Zhang Yi's dual guns came out in unison, separated by a distance of 5 kilometers, and the gunfire formed 2 continuous rains of black light that covered Demon God Ding's entire body without stopping for a moment. Demon God Ding wanted to escape, but he couldn't dodge at all. No matter how fast he moved, Zhang Yi's bullets would be waiting for him in advance of his next position. Warning! The left forelimb body is out of control. The alarm sounded once again, and Demon God Ding's scalp went a little numb as Zhang Yi also used his Divine Realm Netherworld Cleansing ability on him once again at the same time. Both the inside and outside of Demon God Ding's body turned into a battlefield. Driven to desperation, he burned the 3rd red energy crystal. Zhang Yi looked at it with a great deal of flesh pain. This was all originally his stuff. Having said that, he was too close at this time and had to choose to burn the same red energy crystal for a collision. Terrifying energy swept through the 8 directions. Demon God Ding used this way to gain temporary peace, but there was no way to stop the spread of the Trojan horse in his body. Besides, Zhang Yi would not give him a chance to deal with the Trojan horse. So far, he had already used 3 red energy crystals. For him this consumption wasn't too much, but if it continued, he might not even be able to carry on a head-to-head duel with Zhang Yi. In the middle of shadow space, Yang Xinxin's eyes gradually became dark, as if they were 2 pitch-black jewels, flickering with a morose light. Success, she said coldly. In the next moment, while Demon God Ding was still thinking about how to break the situation, his face was suddenly hit by a powerful force. This is... He looked to his left side in dismay, and the one that attacked him was no one else, it was actually his own left arm. The other party hadn't just made his body go out of control, but had taken control of part of his body. Trojan horse, the illusory technique used on androids. The blow was too sudden, and Demon God Ding's cheek shattered by his own arm, his body losing its balance in midair. Zhang Yi would not give him the time to repair it, and the divine refinement in his hand transformed into a huge sniper cannon, aiming at its bearing and outputting at full power. An earth-shattering roar followed by a star-piercing cannon that was so dark that it cast a shadow over the entire world was aimed directly at Demon God Ding's body that had lost its balance. The opportunity was only a split second away, and at this moment, Demon God Ding was the most vulnerable. He braced himself and raised his right hand, his lance in front of his body, releasing a powerful defensive force field. This strike caused the world in front of him to turn into complete darkness, and even the defensive force field began to become somewhat unstable. However, before he could wait for him to breathe a sigh of relief, that left arm was once again raised, aiming another hard punch at his face. The force of this blow was so great that it almost smashed his head off his neck. Zhang Yi seized this opportunity, and the divine refinement in his hand quickly morphed into countless silver vines that scurried towards Demon God Ding's body like a swarm of snakes. They climbed onto the body of the demon god, wrapping around every piece of the organism like a maggot on a bone, before lashing out and starting to tear. Demon God Ding tried to break these vines, but his left hand was like an impact drill that began to attack his body mercilessly and continuously. The damage to his body was getting worse and worse, and the source system inside him was exerting all its strength to resist Yang Xinxin's Trojan horse invasion. However, the battle situation had already begun to develop in a direction that he could not control. Even Zhang Yi's divine refinement vines were not something he could easily break free from. This was because divine refinement had already fused the weapon material of the demon god Gui, which was made of the same material as his body, greatly enhancing the strength of divine refinement. Combined with the toughness and regenerative ability of the sword in the tree, once he was entangled, he would completely fall into the endless hell of vines. It's time to end it. Zhang Yi maneuvered the sword in the tree and raised his supernatural output to the maximum, completing one of the most silent operations between the two of them, he and Yang Xinxin. The sword in the tree tore at Demon God Ding's body. Yang Xinxin controlled his left hand to suddenly pinch his chin, and two distinct forces erupted violently between them. Ka-ching! Ka-chow! Ka-chow! The sound of twisting metal kept coming, and Demon God Ding's neck, which had already been twisted by the blast of his own left arm, violently began to be torn apart. Inside his eyes, the data flow was completely chaotic at this point. White light erupted from within him, and at the last moment he still tried to utilize his ability to reverse time in the area around himself. Time and space reverse flow. A low voice sounded above behind him. In an instant, he felt the power within his body suddenly pour out as if someone had opened a large hole in his body. Time and space reversal flow. It wasn't time that was reversed, it was just the other party's ability, returning it to its original energy form. Demon God Ding's near-death counterattack was directly erased by Zhang Yi. Bang! With a loud bang, his head was hardened and plucked straight off his neck. It was hard to imagine just how hard his body was, and it took Zhang Yi and Yang Xinxin a tremendous amount of effort to team up and do it. Zhang Yi was not the slightest bit careless, as this was not a simple creature, but an android. Even if his head was separated from his body, he still possessed a powerful threat. The divine refinement vines covered his body completely. Xinxin, seize control of his torso first. Copy that. Right away. Yang Xinxin quickly operated the Trojan horse for the invasion. The center of the demon god was in the head, and after losing the head, the torso was even less resistant to Yang Xinxin's invasion. But even so, Zhang Yi could still feel the remnants of the torso struggling violently. Zhang Yi controlled the torso of Demon God Ding while not forgetting his head. That was his true body, where the source of sacrifice spirit was located. Zhang Yi detached hundreds of vines and yanked the falling head in midair. Without his body, Demon God Ding was already struggling to resist Zhang Yi's power. Although he was still desperately exploiting his ability to disintegrate Zhang Yi's divine refinement vines, this kind of thing itself could constantly regenerate, and it couldn't be killed if Zhang Yi didn't die. Soon the head of Demon God Ding was wrapped into a huge sphere. Zhang Yi did not have any hesitation, he could feel the torso of demon god Ding start to struggle violently. This was a counterattack before dying. He looked at the sphere in the air and unleashed the Divine Realm Netherworld Cleansing's ability once again. This time, the already shattered head was directly twisted viciously, almost squeezed into a twisted metal ball. However, in a matter of time, Yang Xinxin was able to completely control the body of demon god Ding. Seeing that it had regained its quietness, Zhang Yi was uneasy and first put it in the middle of his dimensional space. Then he took the head of demon god Ding over again. Xinxin, do it. Zhang Yi gave Yang Xinxin a look, and of course, Yang Xinxin understood what it meant. Her Angel of Desire ability was activated, and the 6 wings angel appeared behind her. 3 pairs of feathered wings were black, red and blue, representing original sin, love, lust and punishment. The red feathered wings were removed and transformed into an arrow in the hand of the Angel of Desire, shooting at the head of demon god Ding. The arrow effortlessly shot into demon god Ding's head and entered his source. However, Yang Xinxin let out a sigh immediately afterward. He's already dead. Dead? Zhang Yi frowned at the twisted head. The artificial man only retained a portion of his origin as proof of a carbon-based creature, the spirit of sacrifice, and the rest of him was transformed into machinery. So what was the meaning of his death, then? Yang Xinxin said, "We were a step slow." He was smart enough to guess that we intended to investigate everything about the mechanical civilization through him. So he realized death in a biological sense. Yang Xinxin pointed to her brain, that is, she deleted all her memories. Zhang Yi took a deep breath and said, "Is it the same as the previous demon god Gui?" Yang Xinxin nodded, "It is. For androids that retained just a little bit of their biological attributes, deleting their memories was tantamount to death. Human memories could be stored in many places, even if it was just the internal organs and limbs, they would retain some of the human memories. This is why some people undergo significant personality changes after organ transplants. But androids obviously don't, they themselves are already the product of the transformation of carbon-based organisms towards silicon-based organisms, and it's questionable whether or not they retain their humanity. It was a pity, because if they could be captured alive, it was clear that they could obtain information about the mechanical civilization. Knowing all their secrets would help in the next battle." Zhang Yi took a deep breath. It's finally over. It was a tough battle to fight. He wiped the sweat from his head. He had to admit that the powerful abilities displayed by demon god Ding earlier had made him a little nervous. If it wasn't for the fact that before they came, they had made sufficient preparations and upgraded their equipment by utilizing demon god Gui's body, it was really hard to say what would happen in this battle. Zhang Yi took out the energy source from demon god Gui's body, which was a copy of a higher-level spirit of sacrifice. Zhang Yi gave the item to Yang Xinxin as promised, personally placing it in the center of her hand. "Xinxin, this is for you." Zhang Yi smiled, but it was too late to be melodramatic as he said, "All right, it's time to clean up the battlefield next." After saying that, he had Mu Yan put Yang Xinxin into shadow space before rushing to the battlefield without stopping to help the others with the finishing touches. Yang Xinxin stood in shadow space, holding that energy source inside her hand, the corner of her mouth curled into a smile. "Becoming Epsilon Ha?" She picked up the not-so-large source. It was very light, yet the workmanship was exquisite, incorporating the science and technology of a civilization's era. "Let's try it then." She wasn't too interested in becoming stronger, even if she didn't have any supernatural abilities. She believed that she was the most important helper by Zhang Yi's side. However, since it was Zhang Yi's request, then she was willing to give it a try. What would be the experience of becoming a higher-level being?